Hey everybody, welcome to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. No Jenaye today, it's just Josh. Sorry to disappoint literally everyone, but it's just me. But I have a great couple of friends that are with us today that I'm so excited for you to get to meet and hear from. And they have a great story of faith in Jesus and also a really incredible journey through raising a family, but business and public service. And so Brent and Sandi Sandford, Lieutenant Governor Brent Sandford and Sandi. And why don't you guys say hi? And
hi, Josh.
Hi.
Well,
so
hi.
glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
And obviously serving in public service right now. Why don't you just tell everybody what you guys are involved in right now and the level that you're serving your family, whatever background you want to give them.
All right. You want to go first? Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Okay. To date, I am doing some government affairs. I work with some conservative groups in the state of North Dakota, some nonprofits, and I work with a 501c3. I work with a 501c4 conservative group, and then I also do some work with North Dakota Right to Life. So that's outside of the family. But of course, I manage the home, and I manage my husband, and we've got a daughter who will be 22, and she's going to Arizona State for a graduate school program. We have a son, Nicholas, who attends public school here in Bismarck, and then we have Aaron, who's going into middle school. So just that alone, managing the house and the home and the kids and the dog.
Yeah, full life.
Full life.
Awesome.
Very busy. I'm currently the Lieutenant Governor, and I've been an elected official. I like to say I've been an elected official for 1/3 of my life. I've been an elected official for going on 17 years now. And city council, when we moved back home to West North Dakota to Watford City in my 30s, and then mayor through the Bakken oil boom, influx of new folks into the city, learned a lot. And then when Doug Burgum was deciding whether he's going to be a candidate for governor or not, he went around the state and was meeting with every community, over 1,000 people. And he really set about to learn who some elected officials are that have done a good job, and who, as he put it to me, he'd like to consider someone for lieutenant governor that could actually take the job if something happened to him. And so we met in February or March of 2016, and little did I know he ended up putting me at the top of his list, and talked to some other folks, but asked me in the end to run with him in April of 2016, and that was after he had won 11% of the vote in the Republican primary. But he determined he's going to run against Wayne Stenjum, who had received 50%, and Rick Becker dropped out of the race. And so I said yes. So he says I'm the crazy one, not him, for moving forward at that point. But I felt like he's going to bring a fresh perspective, a non-government perspective to this job, of a business perspective, a North Dakotan who'd done well in his private life, and someone who cares deeply about Fargo. And and had been redeveloping the inner city of Fargo with Kilbourne Group since he'd left Microsoft. That had been his role. And I felt like he's going to need someone that understands local government, small business, Western North Dakota, and the oil and gas industry and the coal industries out west. And so I said yes. And so here we are. It's been quite a ride for 6 years.
Yeah. Well, what I have loved getting to know about you guys is, as I've gotten to know you more, is you're Western North Dakota people. That resonates with me. That's where I come from. And just you embody so much of what that means and what you believe in, what you're for, and just how real you are. It's very much, you don't have to guess. It's like you are who you are, and you're people of integrity and just great values, and see that in your family as well. And but also people of real passion, and you care, and you want justice and righteousness to rule and to reign, and in God's kingdom, but also in the systems of the world. And so I'm super grateful that, he tapped you and said, hey, do you want to jump into my 11% over here? And that you said yes, because I've just watched over the last couple of years, especially as it's been so turbulent with maybe it's always turbulent with politics, but especially in the last couple of years, just all the different things that happened. Sandi, I don't think you mentioned it, but being a respiratory therapist by trade, right?
Right.
And just all the things that you've navigated through. And I know the pressure that I felt through those times, but definitely, and the criticisms, and have seen you guys just walk through that and be strong and be people of conviction. And those moments matter because it's in those moments when people who don't have a grounding, they're thrown this way and then that way and then this way. But I've just seen your Christian godly character hold you steadfast so many times. And at other times being like, man, I missed it. I got to correct that, and just being so led, And so I would just say that to everybody that's watching, but also just say, I respect you guys so much for that and for your passion and your leadership, both of you in your own right. It's really, really awesome to watch and grateful for it. But why don't you jump back a little bit? Because I know that's not really where it started. You were in Western North Dakota, right? Ended up in Denver and then back in Western North Dakota. So can you take us through that journey that your family went through?
Well, yeah. And originally we were married and we lived in Fargo, North Dakota. So it starts there prior to moving.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead?
I'm from Watford City and Sandi's from Williston and her mom's from Watford City. And so we kind of knew of each other in high school. One of her first cousins was one of my best friends in high school, and right. And so then we fast forward into college years, and we ended up dating, and then eventually getting married and settled in Fargo. And I went to UND for accounting. My dad said, "You won't be coming back to run this dealership. There's nothing happening in this small town. Everybody gets a degree and they leave, and they come back for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's just how it works in small town West North Dakota. There won't be anything for you here." We'll see you at Thanksgiving, Christmas, period. And so then you go off and get a degree, and then we got married, and we enjoyed Fargo. Sandi was a respiratory therapist. She worked at Merit Care, which is now Sanford Hospital.
Right.
I worked at Ide Bailey. Saw the world traveling at work and as a CPA and seeing all these great firms and organizations and nonprofits and governmental entities and for-profits, entrepreneurs on best ways of doing business and the worst ways of doing business. It was a great experience. And so we got to travel in our 20s and travel to Europe with my folks, thankfully, with what it's like now to travel. I'm sure glad we did some of that back then.
Right.
Where's the best place you've been? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what stands out?
Germany, doing the castle tours and Rhine River cruise was very awesome.
I would say I loved England. I loved England, and France is beautiful, but England
was very comfortable and welcoming. We stayed in a little village called Greatworth that had gravestones from the early part of the last century, or this last 1100, 1300, 1400 type, old church, stone fence around the city basically. And there's a tiny little village next. It was close to Stratford upon Avon, and it had a pub. And so we'd go down there at the end of the day after driving around on the wrong side of the street or wrong side of the road around rural England, and it was an amazing experience. And we both have Norwegian heritage, and so we both think that'd be kind of cool to go there someday, but we made it to Germany, France, England, and had a great time. And in America, we've been all around, of course. You find more and more people that haven't traveled a lot in the United States, which is kind of phenomenal. But we stumbled upon Cannon Beach, Oregon, a few years ago, trying to get to the West Coast, and a 2-day drive, and you wake up and there's the Goonie Rocks.
Right, I've been there, yeah.
You wake up and there they are from the show The Goonies. It's right on the beach. Beautiful place. I mean, could go on and on, but no, had some good travel, and then kids came along. So then we're both firstborn, so that probably gives some hint of the passion and the bossiness, and we're both push. Both firstborns, our younger siblings say that all the time, but.
So was it, will you marry me, or you're going to marry me, from firstborn to firstborn? Was it love at first sight? Did you guys date a long time?
We didn't date a long time.
Well, 2 years. We were in college, and I think
whatever
I knew,
you think is a long time.
Yeah.
Relationships.
I knew that we were going to get married, a year before he proposed, and I knew that I wanted to marry you, and I thought, well, of course, I'm not going to tell you that because then you'll run. You don't tell him prematurely, right?
How old were you guys?
We were 22, and when he proposed to me, I was in Fargo, and he was in Grand Forks, and he came down one evening, and
in the middle of the week.
So it was a total surprise. But when he asked me to get married, it was it before Easter or after Easter? Of course, I don't know dates.
It was right around Easter time.
But I assumed that we would get married like in the fall, or even I had this dream of kind of like a Christmas wedding. Who doesn't love Christmas? And he said, well, I'm ready now. We're getting married now. And
I'm graduating and we'll have a job in August. And what are we going to do in the meantime?
I'm asking you now because I'm ready today, now. And so he graduated in May from UND, and we were married in July.
Wow.
And and I know that, that kind of a quick, people just don't do that. They didn't do that then. People did have long engagements, and we've been married, it'll be 28 years next week.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we would have probably planned out our children, like I tell this all the time, age 24, 26, 28, and then probably 3 would be good enough, right?
No, 5.
Yeah, she thought she had 4 kids in her family, so 5 sounded good.
I wanted 5.
We had 3 in mine. I thought 3 is pretty good.
Yeah.
But
we always said 5, and then we had 1, and we were like 4, and then we had 2, and we were like 3.
We're converging on 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You're very outnumbered at 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Sydney comes along at age 28, and then we fast forward. We move with career opportunities to Phoenix, and then to Denver, and no second child coming. You think we had a baby, there shouldn't 2 years later there be another baby, and Sandi, she can tell this story a lot better than me, but I'll go really fast. But she had a diagnosis of secondary infertility, whatever that means, and I thought that doesn't make sense. We were able to have one, right? And so we went through a lot of trials and tribulations, and then eventually moved back to Watford City. And there's a lot of story to that, to take over family car business, and jumped onto city council. And then all of a sudden, Nicholas is born, and we're in our late 30s. And then 3 years later, pushing 40, and here comes Aaron. So it was like, I tell people all the time, it's God's plan. It's not your plan, especially, and something that lets you really feel like you're not in control of things can be that.
Yeah, there's so many people that wrestle with infertility, and part of it is actually just wondering if you'll ever get pregnant, and the other part I feel like is just your plan being disrupted.
Yeah.
And having to try to navigate that, and how difficult that can be.
Right. Yeah, we were told after Sydney with this, what they defined as secondary infertility, that would be it. And we were candidates for aggressive therapies in order to become pregnant. And we went and first of all, diagnostically, we explored everything. And then we wanted to explore all the options in order to have a baby. And it was too much for us. And I don't mean in regards to the expense, or we just knew we weren't candidates for that. And so we started exploring adoption. We looked into, we started the process even with a company in Colorado. And then in the meantime, as we were exploring that process, we ended up moving back to North Dakota, to rural Watford City, North Dakota. And it was there where years later that I found that I was expecting Nicholas. Tell them about Sydney had a dream when she was like 6 or 7. We had just moved to North Dakota back.
Yeah, we had so like from a faith perspective, I would say we both working through with having faith all the way through. Our moms were both very much, Jesus has been a part of our lives since the earliest days. You can't remember days before Jesus, and not knowing who our Savior is, but then going through our 20s with being so career oriented and pros and cons lists and driven, and we're going to succeed in our career, and then we'll take care of what we're supposed to do with the faith part of our lives, right? And I would say in Denver there was kind of a crisis situation of, is this all worth it? Of working this hard, being at the top of our profession, and having a great place to live, and being in a great place, and then feeling like emptiness and loneliness. And so then it was like, we got to give it up to Jesus and see where it leads, and see where those doors open. And then doors just started opening, and my dad's ready to sell the business, and they were going to close the doors. And I said, that's not right. S&S Motors has to continue in Watford City. And Sandi said, oh my goodness, if I hadn't known you for this many years, I think you're insane to want to go move back to that little dying town and do this. But well, I guess we're going to do it. And so basically put everything on a shelf financially, career-wise, and moved home. And shortly after that, Sydney was 5, and she had a dream. She was 4, and she had a dream.
Well, and here we're returning from Denver. We were living in Denver, Colorado, which in regards to healthcare was, like a high level of healthcare and experts in all fields of care. And so when we moved from Denver, Colorado and moved to Western North Dakota, you're moving to a place that's isolated, not high levels of care. And so we had abandoned this idea that we were going to have more children, except for adoption. Mm-hmm. And so we made this move saying, okay, we've got our one child, and we were okay even if we were just to have one child, if that was God's plan. So we moved there and said, God, you have this, whatever you want to, we're going to move home now, because we believe, even though it seemed insane to everybody watching, in fact, his boss from Colorado called and said, are you, is he okay? Truly, do you know what you're doing?
Did you have a nervous breakdown?
Because, his boss knew what he was walking away from, because his boss had plans. And he thought, wow, this is crazy. But we knew that the Lord was pulling at his heartstring, not necessarily mine. Mm-hmm. He was pulling at his, and I just went, okay, I know God has him, so I'm just going to keep my eyes on both of them. And so I was compliant and went home. And anyway, we end up home, and then there's Sydney, who.
So Sydney's just been such a faithful little being her whole life, and so she's singing and sings Jesus songs and whatever else, and she wakes up in the morning, comes downstairs. I had a dream. Mm-hmm. My grandmas that went to heaven before us came to me and said that I'm going to be a big sister when I be 6.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, we just went, cute.
Cute.
Yeah,
I wrote it in my journal and told Sandi, I said, oh.
Yeah, we just cute.
It's
all cute, Sydney.
Bless her heart.
Yeah.
And
didn't think much of it.
Yeah. And so then Sydney's 6, and Sandi was again looking at, in vitro, what kind of options with the doctor, who said, I don't think that's your issue. I think it might be something else, but we need some more tests. First, you have to do a pregnancy test, because if you are pregnant, this test will take care of whatever's inside of you in a bad way. And so she's like, okay, whatever. So she's going to go back to her doctor in Williston. And then she has a dream. And she has a dream that they're making fun of her because you always think you're pregnant. You always think you're pregnant, Sandi. And she goes up the next day and she's pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. I was supposed to have this ultrasound, and you, in order to have this ultrasound, this technique, it was, it required a pregnancy test, because doing this sort of ultrasound would have caused a spontaneous miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And so the night before I travel over to Williston to have this test, I had this dream, and I'm laying on the table ready to have this ultrasound, and I'm pushing them off because I'm saying, you can't do this because I'm pregnant, and they're kind of mocking me. Well, the next day I go to Williston, yes, just as he said, and I have this pregnancy test, and they said, if it's positive, we can't do the test. If it's negative, you'll come back tomorrow for the ultrasound. And I'm driving home back to Watford City, and the nurse calls me and says, you're pregnant. And,
were you just floored?
well, yeah, because it was not, yeah, absolutely, because this is why we were there for, absolutely, it was not to be, clinically, and yet there it was. There he was. Yeah.
And then there were, at about 20 weeks, she went back for the appointment, and they were in alarm. They said that the baby could be in distress. He might be spontaneously having this baby anytime. You need to go to Billings and check it out. And she's telling me this the whole time, get bags ready, get my mom's bags ready. And she's in Billings, and they're telling her, this could be bad. And this is what happens if baby's born at 20 weeks and 21 weeks. And so we're learning all this. And they said, well, what do you want to do? She said, well, we're just going to go with it and see what happens. And, well, if you go home, you can't go home because there's no neonatal units anywhere near Watford City. And then her OB from Williston said, I will call the sheriff if you're anywhere near your hometown. So you need to go to Denver, or at least Billings or Bismarck or Fargo or something. So she checked into the Ronald McDonald House in Bismarck at like 21 weeks. And Sydney and I were at home, and we were, it was the two of us, and we'd come down on the weekends. And Sandi was basically in prayer for this long, and everything just felt right. And in the end, Nicholas was born full term, 9 pounds on January 2nd. So me as the accountant, she hates this joke, but I tell us all the time, we went past our deductibles and our copays because they had a C-section past term at 9 pounds on January 2nd. And
Wow.
I asked the doctor, couldn't you do this on the 29th or 30th? He said, I'm out of town. And she looked at me like, are you nuts after all this?
Yeah.
But anyway, January 2nd, this little guy's born at 9 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
After all that. And then 3 years later, was that when you went to our friend's house in Williston? And
Yeah, but
when you
even
found out with Aaron?
even with Nick, before I left for the Ronald McDonald House in September of 2007, I had gone to the altar at our assembly church in Watford City, and I just brought everything to Jesus and just said, you know what, regardless of outcome, he's yours. This baby is yours, and so I had given him the burden, and then before I left for the Ronald McDonald House, all the women, the Spirit-filled women of our church, were called over to my home. And they just kept coming into my living room. First I thought it was going to be 2 people. And then I thought, well, I knew that the 2 or 4 or 6 people that would be there. And then there were 10 and 12 and 18. And I think there was over 20 women in our little living room in our home. And they just laid their hands on me and in Watford City in my living room. And this is, right before I'm leaving, and they just laid their hands on me. And he just took everything out of, there was no anxiety. There was peacefulness. And I went to Bismarck and checked into the Ronald McDonald House. And I'm sure my doctor thought I was crazy because I just said, it's going to be okay. I would tell the doctor, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And at that point, when I first moved there, I was seeing him 2 or 3 times a week because they really wanted me in the hospital. And I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I just knew. The Lord just told me, everything's going to be fine. You just have faith in me. You just keep your eyeballs on me and your heart on me, and I'll take care of this little guy. And that kiddo was not born until January of 2008.
Yeah, wow.
And how the Lord works in all these mysterious ways. So the doctor, we meet the doctor. Where are you from? And he's kind of hyper. He said, I'm from UND Medicine. They called me the Doctor of Rock. And he's just a funny man. Where are you from? Wilson, Watford. Oh, my very best friend from college from Watford. You'll never know him. He hasn't been around this country for 30, 40 years. His name is Steve Hovitt, and that's her uncle.
Oh, wow.
Was the doctor's best
small
friend.
Little
I know.
Just so at ease.
All the little
know.
assurances.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's something, because I know there's more to this story of not just being led to Watford, to have more children, but it was also God's timing for a lot of other things that were about to happen. And I remember actually first meeting you and thinking, oh, people that are in a high level of government service, you almost, for me, I almost associated that with ambition. There must always be ambition and what's the next hill to climb kind of thing. And I remember just meeting you guys and realizing oh, they're not led by that. It's led by, it's led. I've just seen consistently, with this story with your kids and also coming back to Watford and what was about to happen in Watford. And then, being asked to step into higher office, it's you were obedient and then a door opened, and you were obedient and a door opened. And it's almost stuff you never could have planned it or predicted it. It's just that you were led and then you were in the right place for what God wanted to do.
Yeah.
I love that.
I would say some of it, for me, I'm more reluctant and I'm kind of dragging my feet. I feel like I've got a rope around him and I'm and he's pulling me the whole way. A lot of the time. And then I just have to just get on board, wake up, grow up. And the Lord kind of just.
But she gives the kick when needed. She, I was on the phone talking to one of Doug Burgum's advisors and he was fishing me out to see if I'd be interested in being in the top 3 or 4 list for lieutenant governor. And she could see what I was doing and she was like, what's going on? She could tell I was getting close to an eye roll type situation or something. And she just, what is going on? I put my hand over the phone and I said, what's going on? She goes, don't do that. There might be a door opening here. Don't do what you always do. Take it seriously. Okay, so get back on. Okay, yep, that's fine. But I say that all the time. Sandy's one that said there could be a door opening.
Yeah.
Be serious. Take it serious.
Yeah.
And she says that to me probably weekly. You know what? There could be a door opening here.
Well, just
Opportunities I don't take.
Yeah.
That she says, you could take these opportunities. I'm like, no, I have a job at hand right here with this job and with all the things happening in the state. And whenever someone says, this would be good for your future, for you, I just think, okay, now I have to really feel and dig deep to say, okay, is this something that I really want to do? Is it good for the people right now? Is it good for what I've got for the job at hand right now? It's not, that is the last reason that I want to do something, some event anywhere, and so it's hard to explain, but Sandy's the check all the time of, but don't be so, what's the word? Questioning of everything or not trying to not be ambitious. It's not that either. We've got to take advantage of the role that the Lord has put us into.
Yeah, I think there's a flip
fullest
side of not being willing to be courageous and stepping in when God has said, I've prepared this for you.
Take your responsibility,
and
right?
Yeah, it's both sides.
Well, and knowing his voice versus, discernment and knowing his call versus, because politics is incredibly and I use the word perverted, it's manipulative. It's people will try to use you and plug you in so if you don't have a compass and I can't even imagine how people feel if they're not people of faith. And I'm going to go a step further. I can't imagine people being filled with the Spirit, Holy Spirit filled. That is probably the difference for us, because we're not just attending church. It's not legalistic for us. We're not just going through these paces of saying we're faithful or being Christians. We're asking the Lord to fill us up, and he's in our heart and our mind, and he is in control. And so if we didn't have that, the ambition, because people, do this because this is good, this looks good, because there is a machine that has plans for, and it's not just even politics, it's everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the difference. And so when I tell him, let me just be clear here, when I've told him to accept these invitations, there's so many people over here that say, don't do it, because he wasn't chosen perhaps by the machine or whatever it is. But this is my point to him. You do it. The Lord has opened this door. Just jump. Because I'm with you. We're jumping together. God's got us regardless.
Yep.
So let's just go and jump.
It's very easy to get sucked into the machine, just try to climb a ladder. People, I think, wrestle with that all the time.
Yeah.
Because you can build your life certain ways,
Yes.
Or I remember when our church was without a pastor before I stepped in, and it was like, oh, there's a lane here to jockey for position, and just saying,
yep,
not going to be about that.
Not going to play.
I'm not going to play.
I'm not
that
playing.
way. Please stop asking me to play that way, And I just think God has honored that in you guys. I think he's honored it. That's why we care about it so much. One of the guys in the room is wearing a shirt that's about meekness, like strength under control.
Yeah.
And being strong, but being able to bridle that back and say, no, but God, you have to lead. Even when I'm tempted to just run. So.
Right.
So back to the story, you're in Watford, things start to explode there, right? You jump into office, right? You guys are serving in a capacity there.
Yeah, business went crazy. I mean, we went from, we had a increasing sales every year for 10 years. And so from 2004 to 2009, we'd had Nick and then pregnant with Aaron. And then I was like, okay, third child on the way. My business went from where I was hoping my early projections would be to do like 12 sales a month, and we did 54 sales in 2009, in November 2009. And the fleet sales, the people with oil leases, with good jobs, with new population coming in, and no new dealerships of any kind on the horizon for another 7 or 8 years, by the way.
And when you guys picked up and moved to Watford,
it was sleepy.
No idea that was all coming.
No, my dad had been selling, my dad and his cousin David had been selling like 6 to 9 vehicles a month, and they wanted to be retired so badly. I tell people there wasn't a wrench or a roll of toilet paper left in that building. It was just them and their secretary Bev, who was their first cousin, and they'd pretty much let everybody go. I mean, it was time it was just winding down to nothing, and the town felt like that. Most of the buildings on Main Street were empty.
And it was hard on us. It was, we were obedient to the Lord, and we were very happy to be close to our families are both from there. So we were surrounded by family. Even in Watford City, my grandparents are my family, my aunties and uncles and cousins. But it was hard because we graduated and lived in Fargo for a time frame. We'd been in Phoenix, we'd been in Denver, and I was spoiled. Spoiled by not just coffee, spoiled. And I was used to Denver. I was used to having things at my fingertips. And I had become a little bit of what I would say a little bit high maintenance. Yeah. And I go there every now and then. I got to come back out. So it still happens. But it was hard in Watford City because I remember.
It was like going on a mission trip.
To
move there at that time. I would say welcome to the outpost. Yeah. There's no hospital. There's no daycare. There's no jobs.
But he had work to do in us. Yeah. He had work to do in us. And I remember Brent said to me, everybody here, I had culture shock, and this was a hometown that my mom grew up in, and I just lived down the road, and I was really having some culture shock. But anyway, we got through that. I grew up a lot. During that time frame, and that's why he put us there.
So then June of 2010 I had to decide if I was going to run again for city council or if I was going to run for mayor, and I kind of decided I'd just be a dad and a husband and keep this business rolling, because you couldn't hire anybody. Everybody was getting oil field jobs and the wages were crazy, and so I had the same staff with that much more going on. I was very busy at work and thought, I could probably call it good with one term on city council. My dad made 2, but my grandpa had been the mayor for 20 years and been on city council for 28 years. And so I kind of had that in me of, there's a reason for service and it helps the community. And it's important for the right people to do this. And there was a city council meeting where it was like all the man camps and the drilling rigs were heading to McKenzie County, to our county, in 2010. And they were saying, where do we put these man camps? Where do we put these skid shacks? Where do we do a laydown yard for pipe? Where are the trucks going to go? And asking these questions, and everybody just looked around each other. What did we do in 1983 when this was here and then it all left? What are we going to do? And so our engineering firm said, you're going to have to do an infrastructure study, and it's going to cost $100 and some million to put this together. And I thought, I have to stay. I'm a CPA. I get how this number stuff rolls together and how the financing works and how it works in Bismarck and county commission, all of it. So I had breakfast with the mayor and told him I'm thinking of running for mayor, and he said, "Oh, I guess I was too." So my ag teacher when I was in high school.
I was going to say, this is somebody you had respect for.
Yeah, my ag teacher when I was in high school, and so Kent and I ran. It was a contested election for once, and I ended up beating him. And in the end, I believe it was tough on his family and tough on some of our friends and that, but in the end, he passed away by the time that term was over. Surprisingly, at age 60, from a problem with I can't remember what it was. His stomach. It was a bad thing. It was quick.
Yeah.
So he passed away, and he had time with his grandkids in that time. But in that time, it was something where it was an incredible financing exercise of how do you bring in 5 times more people, and the school enrollment went from 550 to 1,200 kids in 2 years, and then continuing marching towards 1,500. And by the time I ran again for mayor in 14, so when Doug tapped me, I'd been in this for 10 years and 6 as mayor, and the population was up 5 times. Sales tax per month was up 50 times. The number of kids being born. By the time we moved to Bismarck, Aaron's class, our youngest, was in a class of 190. When Sydney, our oldest, was born in the year 2000, 6 kids were born in that area. So it's like 30 times the number of kids being born
Yeah.
per year and
Wow.
50 times more sales tax, that kind of growth. So
Which for Western North Dakota, I mean, and those communities, that's just explosive.
no, and then it wasn't the growth wasn't really validated in my mind until the census took place in 2020. And it was as of April 1, so after the pandemic, and people left the apartments and the trailer parks and they went home, like a couple week vacation. Little did they know they'd be on lockdown for a year. But the population actually shrunk even in a 2 weeks to 3 week period. But they still counted 6,700 people in Watford City, and the census in 2010 was 1,700.
Wow.
It's almost 4 times growth.
Right.
And it was even with that, with some people leaving in that time, McKenzie County had the highest growth of any county by far in the nation at that time. And so that's what we went through. And it was a short amount of time. We were there for a window of time. And yeah, it was extraordinary. We learned a lot, and mostly it's just to stick to what's right and don't pick favorites and don't. What I didn't like about previous regimes was it was always whose house is that and whose business is that, and no, it shouldn't matter. You have to have the right system, the right ordinances, the right rules, right laws, and just stick to them. And then other people might come and find that it's a good place to come and live, and they have an equal shot, an equal chance, and so fairness and and we've seen it was a business friendly place, but also hopefully it was as friendly as you can be coming into that chaotic of a situation for families. So we went into daycare projects and a new hospital and new schools and it's extensive, and it's still chaotic out there to have that much growth, but it was a family focused type growth.
Yeah. So let me fast forward a little bit to 2020 when and everything that took place in everybody's lives through that year. And I know, Sandi, so much of what you're doing has just kind of exploded. I think over the last couple of years, even your influence and what you've been speaking into and then things that you were trained in leadership for a long time, you come to a good crisis and all that stuff comes to the surface. And so I would just love to know what was the most challenging, what's been the most challenging for you from COVID and moving forward, from 2020 forward? What have you, just as a leader, as a believer, what have you had to wrestle through? And then what has given you resolve that's like, here's like what I'm pushing for and believing for next. And so kind of a twofold question. But
I can give a quicker answer maybe just, and then she can go. But mine is that to have that discernment of what's right and not listen to those opposing voices. And when right away in March of 2020, it was like apparent, this is so political. This is actually turning into something that was evidently nothing in January when President Trump put on the no-fly orders to China. The Congress thought this is him being a xenophobe. This is nothing. This is not anything to worry about, this virus. And then the week after the impeachment fails, all of a sudden, society's going to end. And schools are going to close, and we're going to send our kids home. And we had our own human services director saying, don't send the kids home. It's going to be a hard thing to recover from if we're going to be sending kids home. I mean, this upsets the apple cart on everything that they've got in place. And, little did we know, Sandi ended up jumping in when, about nursing homes and what was happening to our vulnerable. But not having cooler heads prevail and not having leadership in D.C., having that discerning thought process of, wait a minute, what's truth here? What's fiction? Why are we manipulating ourselves and manipulating each other like this? Is it because this is an election year? And so every election year, every 4 years, we're going to have extreme politics, and this took the cake, to take a bad flu year, we would have called it in other years, and all of a sudden, no, it's a pandemic, and it could wipe us all out, and we have to force each other into staying home and closing businesses and not having church services on Easter and closing down schools for entire years in some of our neighboring states. And it's incredible what we went through, and not to have that discernment of what this really is. And it seems like it's starting to sort out now that no, there's school districts in Fargo and West Fargo that had different strategies on masks, different strategies on who goes home and who's in school, and the same statistics. So what is the best path moving forward? Let's have cooler heads prevail and say, how do you treat someone that gets this virus? Period. That's what we should be worried about. And if it's more vulnerable are subject to more worrisome conditions, then how do we protect the more vulnerable? And those should have been the worries up front, Josh. It shouldn't have taken 2.5 years to get back to the common sense. So that's frustrating.
How do you do that when emotions are high, people are afraid, you have agendas coming in, and then you're trying to let cooler heads prevail? Did you discover through the last couple of years of, how do you kind of stop the chaos that can ensue and allow that to happen? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know how you do that without faith. I don't know how you do it without being grounded and listening for that small voice and listening and having the concept of discernment in your own heart of, okay, what is this really? Lord, lay it out in front of me, and it's validated when you look back and say, okay, this was not TB, this is not tuberculosis, this was not Ebola, this is not polio, this is COVID-19. We've had other COVID, we've had COVID before, we're gonna have COVID again,
right?
And so, yeah, that's where we are. I mean, it's and Sandi was just talking in the car on the way over that there's the CDC is putting out suggestions on masks again, and so what are we going to do about it? And so we don't know what's going to happen. This has been a polarizing election cycle too. What's going to happen in the 2023 election cycle or the legislative session in North Dakota? What's going to happen in Congress if one of the chambers switches to Republican so there's balance? What are they going to do when they have balance? Are they still going to fight about this, or are they going to try to get something done? It's concerning of where we're going to move. What's going to get us out of this fighting mindset about coronavirus? What is it? I don't know.
I'd like to add, as you said, you mentioned I'm a registered respiratory therapist, or I was. I've let my license go, and I am part of the Great Resignation in the last year. I've left my profession based on everything, the mandate specifically, the shot mandate. But if you would have told me a month before COVID entered the United States that we were going to close down our nation, and as an American, I couldn't go to work, I would have told you 30 days prior to that you were crazy. But we were watching COVID. He was watching it, what was going on in Europe. And then we were watching the coast. We were listening to see what was happening on the East Coast and the West Coast, because that's where it came in first.
Right.
And it was January and February of 2020, and I was watching this as a respiratory therapist. And I was, they were doing these treatments, or they were following these protocols that were not necessarily what we call standards of practice in the United States, national standards of practice. And so in watching this, why was this happening? Because the the CDC was listening to the World Health Organization, and they were deferring to, treatments that were working in Europe or across the world. And I told Brent, I said, this is really incredible. We in America have had policies and procedures and protocols to treat respiratory distress syndromes and, sudden respiratory distress and H1N1. And I mean, we're the leaders of the world in critical care and in ICU. And we deferred to the World Health Organization on so many things. And I told him, I said, they're actually, in my opinion, the United States and in critical care hospitals were not utilizing normal standards of practice and protocols. And it looked like they were doing a lot of damage that didn't necessarily have to be done.
Not giving nebulizers and inhalers and traditional respiratory
there's
medicines
protocol.
Where she saw it. Like, why are you not doing the traditional?
Yeah, so
inhalers, nebulizers, what's happening? Why are you just giving comfort measures? They're not going to, if they need oxygen or they need to open that airway, they're not going to survive. And so it was Sandi was right away finding inconsistency of what's going on.
And I really did think it was straighten itself out. I really did. I mean, I was cautious. I mean, I know there's virus. I mean, I was respectful of this when it came in March and April, and I was listening and pretty okay, we're going to shut down for a couple of weeks, and okay, we're going to comply, and until about May 1st. And then with the masks, again, as they've said, follow the science right away. Well, there's really the science, all the studies that I had with a fabric or surgical mask, there was no science there. I mean, it's courtesy, absolutely a courtesy. And I've worn a mask in situations in the emergency room or, as a shield. I mean, courtesy, a splash guard. So as a person that's worked clinically, I went, okay, but not to stop a virus. And so when the mandates and this really hard push for masks came forward, and they pushed that agenda with follow the science. Well, I knew there was no science. And as he referred to, now we have wonderful studies have now, there was a Brown's Institute study that came out last week, and they did use numbers in North Dakota. They used Fargo numbers versus West Fargo numbers because the Fargo students had to they were under a mask mandate where the West Fargo schools were not. And there's no difference if you wore a mask, and that's what he was referring to. So I do believe in science. I really, truly do. And now we're finally seeing that what we did 24 months ago was not science.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and some of it I think was grasping for control in people's lives, trying to get a handle. Because I remember looking out the window in, May 2020 and thinking, is my life ever going to be the same? Like, when am I going to be able to go to a movie or and kind of grasping.
Right.
But the hindsight is, no pun intended, but 2020,
Yes.
And you look back and you see, man, there's a lot of stuff that we did that I think out of not knowing what was going on was probably right in the moment.
Yes.
But then a lot of things where you realize, man, it didn't really make a difference when you look just statistically across the board at what happened. And I think that can be hard to accept too when your life has been very disrupted, by different things. And so I know that has motivated you into other causes and stuff that you're working with. And so what is out of the challenges that you guys faced, what now are you fixated on, excited about, looking for the future to move forward, and what are you passionate about?
Well, I could say everything that we've just gone through the last 30 months, COVID, overreach, everything that we've endured, as hard as it's been, nobody was exempt from it, first of all. Everybody it affected all of us. But I would say that it's actually exposed a lot. It really has. It's pulled back. I mean, we now know who's who and it's really clear to me on these agendas. And I'm encouraged because I have more people that I'm working with right now that I would have said 2 years ago were kind of not paying attention, and they are now watching and awake. So my camp and my people, it's just grown. It's just grown. So I want to be encouraging to people. I'm working again with North Dakota Right to Life, and I'm working with some conservative groups. But I want to encourage people. I want people to pay attention and not be afraid to speak up. If you have a child in public school, I want them to know what's going on, bring it to their school, but get involved. Get involved. I want locals to, we have one child in public school, we have one child in private school. I'll tell you what, if this happens again, my kids are coming home. I'm not going to go through this again. So I really want people to be ready to make those decisions as well. We cannot we can't be so complacent. And because boy, it is easy, to send. We were just talking about schools, schools coming up, and it's so rigid, and it's kind of easy too to send your kid to school.
Yeah.
Versus homeschooling, and I think we can't be lazy.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to move really fast.
We talk about that a lot. Every time that you send your child somewhere, you are delegating them to someone's care.
Right.
That's right.
And who have I delegated my children to? So that I can work, or so that I can travel, or so that I can, and just always assessing, is this where I want and what I want my child delegated to, even if it's convenient? You know, if right now the seeds that are being put in their life are going to reap a harvest later on, those are such important decisions, you know?
Yeah, we might have been too comfortable in 2019, but I mean the shelves aren't stocked anymore, and the car lots are not stocked anymore, and gas isn't $2 anymore. I mean, so hopefully I would hope for a couple things: less complacency, more paying attention, and number two is more personal responsibility is seen as an actual solution for these things. I mean, let's take if we're worried about COVID, let's be honest about the therapeutics that are available.
Yes.
Let's be honest about the tools that are available now, the knowledge we have now. That let's make sure people stand up and say we don't want to do those responses that we had. And you can see nationwide that the schools were a referendum in Virginia, and they also were in a lot of legislative districts and a lot of school board areas in a lot of states. You know, and so the parents seeing this, you know, went for changes on school boards. And so let's see that come to fruition, and back to the personal responsibility and respect for individuality too. But we also know a lot more, because I tell you what, there's so many responsibilities that we have as Americans for the turmoil in the world, and as North Dakotans. And right now, I mean, I'm just excited as always about what we have for agriculture and energy and those resources, and what we have for work ethic and business friendliness and accepting and willingness of quality of life type attributes. We're actually scoring high on quality of life attributes because of how we're handling ourselves versus some other states the last few years. And so let's take advantage as North Dakotans. Let's be positive. Let's work together. Let's not get bogged down in slinging mud on things that really don't matter. And so I hope we can move past those times. And I'm always optimistic, and I'm optimistic for the next legislative session in the next couple of years. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed in my world that there's pastors who have said, you know what, with everything that's happened, and recently Roe v. Wade and so many other things, they've said, hey, I'm going to take a voice of what morality and godliness is. You know, and I think it's empowered pastors to say, like, oh, I have leaders who are with godly wisdom, humility, meekness, speaking truth into the spheres of society where I think before people said, don't say those things, you'll chase people away. You know, but I feel like people are searching for solid ground,
yes,
you know, and for truth and for biblical truth in the midst of all of this.
Absolutely.
And I think it's been empowering for pastors, because even if they don't feel like they have the words to speak, or they don't know what their voice should sound like in that conversation, there's leaders who are emerging with great wisdom and meekness who are giving voice to it. And I think we've also just learned that there's people that have differing views that I can coexist with.
Right.
You know, and we can have a good conversation about it.
Right.
And not necessarily agree 100%, or land in the same space, but still be in relationship.
Yeah.
You know, and that's possible,
That is right.
to do that. And
it's felt like we've lost that. So
yeah,
keep that up, and you have a very important job right now.
And I feel like I'm hoping that that's what's recovered through some of this has been, we're tired of fighting and
I know.
And drawing lines in the sand, and we might not agree, but let's reason together and go with what you believe is right, you know. And so that's what makes me hopeful about even everything that we've walked through. And I've seen, man, North Dakotans, for me as a pastor, our church is resilient, more resilient than I ever. If you would have told me, you know, 2 years ago that we would not pass an offering bucket for 2 years and our church would be okay, you know, something that classically you just do in church, or that people would still come even after enduring, man, what do we do? How do we handle this? It's shown me, man, the church is resilient. People are resilient. North Dakotans are good people.
Right.
They are resilient. They want truth and righteousness and justice, like we've talked about. And so, I don't know, I've found solace and hope in that, you know, that the world's not going to hell in a handbasket. You know,
well, people are hungry for this.
Yeah, we're hungry for truth and for what's right. So
right.
I think it makes an opportunity. So, well, again, I just want to say, from observing your lives, I would just love to affirm as an example to other people of what it is to just say, God, I think this is where you're leading us, and we don't have it all figured out. We don't know why necessarily. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to go with you, and seeing that over and over again in your guys' lives, with your kids, with moving to Watford, with stepping into the positions that you're in right now. It makes me excited to watch, where God continues to lead you, and how you influence others to be people of conviction and integrity. And so thanks for being that example in my life and in Jenaye's life. And we appreciate that there's godly leadership at that level in our state that we're under. And so just admire that about you guys, and want to affirm that. So thanks
you, Josh.
also.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks also for making time to do this.
No, it was fun.
I know there's people that want to get to know you on this level, and you can't have a coffee with everybody necessarily. So that's why we do this. It feels like we had a coffee
Yeah,
together.
it does.
So thank you guys. And thank all of you for watching and listening. And again, if you appreciated this, tell a friend about it, share it, like it, drop a comment, whatever it is. And we want to know that this is something that you appreciate too. And so this is the last episode of the season for Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. And so we're working on season 2 coming very, very soon. And so glad that you've been with us through these last several episodes. And there's more to come, and it's going to be good. The best is always ahead. So thanks for joining today.